In the darkness over a tropical sea, a mountain detonates, and 3 columns of fire climb out of its summit and merge into one burning pillar. Stones of floating rock hammer the deck of a sailing ship in total blackness. Villagers run beneath a sky of falling ash as a wall of grey cloud swallows an island coastline whole. And 1 year later, on the far side of the planet, fresh snow buries a summer farm field in New England. Every one of those images comes from the same single event. On a remote island east of Java, a sleeping mountain is about to steal an entire season from the human race. The year is 1815. How does an unknown island volcano reach across the planet and cancel summer in Vermont, in Geneva, and in the fields of Ireland? What this mountain is about to do will become the most powerful eruption in recorded human history, and it will teach the world, at a terrible price, that the atmosphere belongs to everyone, and when it is over, the world it wounds will never even learn its name. The story begins on an island that believes it has nothing to fear. Sumbawa rises out of the warm seas of the Dutch East Indies, an island of sandalwood forests, honey, rice, coffee, and horses prized in markets 1,000 kilometers away. Its coastal villages trade with Dutch, British, and Bugis ships that thread these waters on routes older than any empire that claims them. Above it all stands Tambora, 4,300 meters tall, one of the highest peaks in the entire archipelago. Farmers plant their crops on its lower slopes, where the volcanic soil is generous and dark. The mountain has been silent for so many generations that no living person on Sumbawa has ever seen it do anything at all. At its western foot sits a small kingdom that carries the mountain's own name, Tambora, a royal court with its own language, spoken nowhere else on earth. But 5 kilometers beneath the summit, sealed under the weight of the mountain, a chamber of molten rock has been filling and pressurizing drop by drop for perhaps 1,000 years. The eruption is only months away, and no one knows it yet. The warnings begin quietly, 3 years before the catastrophe. In 1812, a dark plume of steam and ash appears above the summit for the first time in living memory. Villagers on the Sangar Peninsula notice a distant grumbling, like thunder with no storm attached to it. Weeks pass, then months. The plume simply becomes part of the horizon, and people grow, used to it, the way people always grow used to a danger that keeps its distance. Life on Sumbawa goes on beneath the smoke. Horse traders drive their famous ponies down to the coast. Farmers measure the seasons by rain and harvest, as their grandparents did. Ships load rice and sandalwood in the island's harbors, and their captains note the smoking peak in their logbooks, the way they note the wind, routine, unremarkable, filed and forgotten. It is worth remembering what does not exist in 1815. There are no seismographs anywhere on Earth. There are no warning networks, no monitoring stations, no instruments of any kind watching this mountain. Science does not yet even agree on what makes a volcano erupt. The only sensors on Sumbawa are human ears. And in the first week of April 1815, those ears begin to hear something entirely new. On the evening of April 5, 1815, Tambora clears its throat. A column of ash punches upward through the clouds, and a series of heavy detonations rolls out across the Java Sea. In Makassar, 380 kilometers to the north, garrison soldiers hear rhythmic booming and conclude that a ship somewhere offshore is firing its cannon in distress. A vessel is dispatched to search for survivors. It finds only empty water. In Batavia, more than 1,200 kilometers from the mountain, the thudding is so convincing that troops are put on alert for an invasion that never comes. On Java, the British Lieutenant Governor, Thomas Stamford Raffles, begins collecting reports from across the archipelago, trying to locate a battle that does not exist. An entire colonial world is listening to a volcano and mistaking it for artillery. Over the next 5 days, fine ash drifts down on ships hundreds of kilometers away, dusting their decks in pale grey. The detonations fade, and many decide the event is over. In the villages of the Sangar Peninsula, closest to the mountain, the nights grow loud with grinding subterranean thunder. The sea itself feels wrong to the fishermen, warmer in patches, dotted with floating stone. Still, no order to leave is given, because there is no authority on earth that knows what is coming. The mountain is not finishing, it is inhaling, and on the evening of the 10th of April, it stops pretending to be anything made by man. At about 7 in the evening on April 10, 1815, 3 separate columns of fire rise from the summit of Tambora and merge into a single burning pillar. Witnesses across the Sangar Peninsula later described the entire mountain, transformed into a body of liquid fire, extending itself in every direction at once. The eruption column climbs to an estimated 43 kilometers, 4 times the cruising altitude of a modern airliner, driving millions of tons of ash and gas straight into the stratosphere. Pumice stones the size of fists rain down on villages and on ships anchored kilometers offshore. Around 8 in the evening, whirlwinds of superheated air tear through the peninsula, ripping up trees by their roots, flattening houses, and lifting horses and cattle bodily off the ground. Then the great column collapses under its own weight, and glowing avalanches of gas, ash, and rock pour down every flank of the mountain, faster than anything on a modern highway, incinerating everything in their path, and boiling the sea white where they strike it. The detonations are heard 2,600 kilometers away, the distance from London to Moscow. Officers on Sumatra record them, and once, again reach for the only explanation they know: distant guns. On the peninsula itself, the village of Sangar is caught between the fire and the sea. A local ruler will later give one of the only surviving eyewitness accounts, describing the 3 columns of flame, the rain of stone, and the wind that carried away roofs, people, and trees together. Before the night is over, Tambora ejects roughly 150 cubic kilometers of rock and ash, enough material to bury the entire island of Manhattan more than 2 kilometers deep. Measured against it, the famous eruption of Krakatoa, still 68 years in the future, will be less than 1/7 of its size. By morning, the top of the mountain no longer exists. The upper third of Tambora, 1,400 vertical meters of solid rock, has been converted into sky and sea, leaving behind a crater 6 kilometers wide and 1 kilometer deep. And for the people of Sumbawa, the catastrophe is only beginning. Darkness holds the region for up to 2 days, a midnight that continues through noon, stretching as far as 600 kilometers from the mountain. Tsunamis up to 4 meters high, the height of a house's ground floor, arriving at running speed, strike the shores of the surrounding islands. Within the hour, rafts of floating pumice, some measuring kilometers across, drift on the sea lanes for years afterward, thick enough that passing captains mistake them for uncharted islands. Ash settles over Sumbawa and neighboring Lombok in layers a meter deep and more. It crushes roofs, buries wells, kills the standing rice in the fields, and poisons the water that remains. Roughly 10,000 people die in the eruption itself, in the flows, the whirlwinds, and the waves, but the ash guarantees that the harvest of 1815 will never come. Famine and disease move through Sumbawa and Lombok in the months that follow, and the toll climbs toward 100,000 lives, the deadliest direct cost of any eruption in recorded history. The little kingdom of Tambora is erased so completely that its language dies with it, one of the only recorded cases of a volcano extinguishing an entire tongue. Nearly 2 centuries later, in 2004, archaeologists cutting into the hardened ash will uncover a buried house with its 2 occupants, still inside, and name the site the Pompeii of the East. In the weeks that follow, a British survey vessel sent from Java sails, along the Sumbawa coast and finds harbors choked with pumice, villages, silent, and survivors wading out to beg passing ships for rice and fresh water. The mountain has destroyed its own island, and the finest part of what it threw into the sky is only beginning its journey. The heaviest ash falls back to Earth within days and weeks. But the eruption has also injected an estimated 60 megatons of sulphur dioxide into the stratosphere, far above the rain, far above the weather, where nothing can wash it out. There, over the following months, the sulphur transforms into a mist of microscopic droplets, an aerosol veil that high-altitude winds stretch, first around the equator and then outward toward both poles, until it wraps the entire planet in a film too thin to see and too high to touch. Each droplet is a tiny mirror, bouncing a fraction of the sun's light back into space, before it can ever reach the ground. The first hints appear within months. In London in the autumn of 1815, observers record sunsets of strange and prolonged fire, twilights that burn orange and crimson long after the sun has gone. Newspapers admire them. Nobody connects them to a mountain on the far side of the world. Beneath the veil, the global average temperature begins to slide roughly, 0.5 degrees Celsius worldwide, and several times that across parts of Europe and North America. And no instrument on Earth can see any of it, a global experiment, running with no one at the controls. 0.5 degree does not sound like much until it arrives in a farmer's field in June. The year 1816 arrives, and summer does not. In New England, killing frosts return in every single month of the year. On the 6th of June, snow falls on Albany, New York, and drifts 15 centimeters deep across parts of Vermont, in a week when farmers should be weeding young corn. Newly shorn sheep freeze in the fields. The corn crop fails, is replanted, and fails again, and the price of grain more than doubles within a year. Across the Atlantic, the summer drowns instead of freezing. Ireland endures around 8 weeks of nearly continuous rain, and the ruined harvest opens the door to famine and a typhus epidemic that kills tens of thousands. In England and France, crowds riot at grain markets, and in East Anglia labourers march under banners demanding bread or blood. In Switzerland, grain prices climb so high that the year 1817 is remembered in the records simply as the year of the beggars. The ripples do not stop at the Atlantic world. In China's Yunnan province, summer cold destroys the rice harvest 3 years in a row, and in India, a disrupted monsoon is followed by an outbreak of cholera in Bengal in 1817 that begins a march across the world, a chain of consequence some researchers now trace all the way back to the volcano. Even invention may bend to the volcano. Oats become so expensive that keeping a horse turns into a luxury, and when a young German inventor named Karl Dreis unveils a 2-wheeled running machine that needs no feeding at all, the direct ancestor of the bicycle, some historians will argue that it is the famine itself that put the world on wheels. In Quebec, snow lies 30 centimeters deep in June, and ice grips ponds across the northern states in July. Farmers' diaries from Maine to Connecticut record the same bewildered arithmetic. Seed planted 3 times, 3 times lost. Whether this strange breeds fear. Preachers announce the end of the world. Farming families abandon Vermont and New Hampshire by the thousands and move west, helping to people the American Midwest. And not one of them, not the rioters, not the preachers, not the inventors, knows that the author of their misery is a headless mountain in the Dutch East Indies. On the shore of Lake Geneva, the ruined summer traps a small group of English travellers indoors. At the Villa Diodati, the poet Lord Byron, 18-year-old Mary Godwin, soon to be Mary Shelley, the poet Percy Shelley, and the physician John Polidori watched the cold rain hammer the windows through the dark June of 1816, under skies lit at night by spectacular storms. To pass the endless indoor hours, Byron issues a challenge. Each of them will write a ghost story. Out of that challenge, under Tambora's darkened sky, Mary Shelley begins. Frankenstein. And Polidori drafts The Vampire, the tale that will one day lead to Dracula. That same July, Byron writes a poem called Darkness, about the sun going out and the world freezing in an endless night. He believes he is writing fantasy. He is very nearly writing a weather report. Across Europe, painters record skies burning with volcanic color, and researchers will later trace the signature of stratospheric dust in the sunset paintings of the era. Mary Shelley will remember it simply as a wet, ungenial summer, the phrase of a writer who never learned what had stolen the sun. A mountain that no European painter has ever seen is quietly choosing the colors on their canvases. And here is the strangest part of the entire story. The world never finds out. In 1815, there is no telegraph, no newswire, nothing on Earth faster than a sailing ship. Word of the eruption takes months to crawl to Europe, arrives as a brief colonial notice, and is forgotten. When summer fails, the following year, not a single newspaper connects the frozen fields of Vermont to a mountain in the Indies. People blame sunspots, grown large enough that year to be seen through, smoked glass and tracked in the newspapers like an invading fleet. They blame the new lightning rods, the clearing of forests, and the anger of God. In Bologna, word spreads that an astronomer has calculated the exact date the sun will go out forever. And on the appointed day, frightened families empty the streets and crowd the churches. The one true cause, hanging invisibly 25 kilometers above their heads, is never even suspected. The answer waits a full century. Only in 1913 does the American physicist William Humphreys demonstrate how volcanic veils cool the Earth, and only in the 20th century do ice cores drilled from Greenland and Antarctica reveal Tambora's sulphur, sealed in the snows of 1815 like a signed confession. The disaster that taught humanity how the atmosphere works had to wait 100 years for humanity to learn how to read it. Today, Tambora still stands on Sumbawa, 2,850 meters tall, a giant missing its head, its summit replaced by a caldera 6 kilometers across. Indonesian volcanologists watch it around the clock with seismometers, satellites, and gas sensors, the instruments its victims never had. Its lesson has become the foundation of an entire science. Every modern climate model that calculates how particles in the stratosphere cool the planet is, in a real sense, a student of 1815. When scientists today debate whether humanity could ever dim the sun deliberately to slow global warming, the experiment they study first is the one Tambora ran on an unwilling world. One mountain, one evening in April, rewrote harvests in Vermont, bread riots in France, the birth of the bicycle, the creation of Frankenstein, and the science of the sky itself. The sun returned in 1817. The lesson never left. If the story of Tambora moves you, explore the eruptions, storms, and silent forces of the deep past that continue to shape the world we think we understand.